Well, hey there, you guys. Welcome back to another show. I am your host, Janeen Alley. You are listening to Becoming the CEO of Your Life today, and we are going to be talking about allowing your work to unfold, allowing your life to unfold with more ease today on the show. And I have been living this. I feel like today, we're right in the middle of Snowmageddon here in the Denver area. We're going to get a ton of snow as we always do mid-March. And I was out running my errands today early on instead of recording the podcast because I didn't want to do errands tonight with the snow, with the slippery roads, with the cold. So it is about 5 p.m. at night. I'm never doing podcasts this late in the afternoon, but here we are, just allowing my life to unfold with a little bit more ease today. So what do I mean by allowing? And that's just one kind of simple example. I'm going to get into some more complicated or more complex examples today on the show, but what does that mean? Like a lot of you, I feel like I am here to make an impact, and I used to take this very seriously, which there isn't anything wrong with being serious, but it was at the expense of allowing or having more fun in what it is that I do. And I find that the antidote to being so serious is to stay really curious. Like, okay, things didn't go the way that I had planned today. So I wonder how this is going to happen. I know I have my own ideas, but I just can't wait to find out how this actually unfolds, knowing that my ideas might pan out like 10 to 20% of the time, right? And it's not that you're just waiting around and watching. I know that you just aren't sitting back on your laurels, being more passive in this experience. I know that you're taking action. But what I used to do is I used to try to control every little thing and not really allow for miracles, or not even allow myself to be a miracle for other people along the way. And so when we allow, there is this element and feeling of ease in what we're doing. We relate so often success to hard work in our society, right? There's got to be blood, sweat, and tears involved in what it is that we're doing. And we end up making things unnecessarily very hard for ourselves. And it restricts this flow of what's trying to come through. Because, like I said, we're just trying to control and take things so seriously and micromanage all of it. So when you're allowing, you're following your gut and you're doing more of what feels good to you. So just even this week, I mean, I gave you an example from today, but just this week, I woke up on Monday with a headache, which is unusual for me. I don't normally wake up feeling like that. But I knew right away that it was going to be more of a down day. So I had to make some pivots. I did have two one-on-one clients that I was working with. But instead of writing website copy for me, which is big work, that's big work for me, I ended up just polishing up my brand book that I had been working on, that a lot of the things were already written in there. I just wanted to massage the message so that it felt more aligned. And so I did that instead. I hung out with my kids. I was able to read my book that I've been working on, which actually was kind of part of the inspiration of the podcast today, which I want to tell you about. So I'm going to just jump in and just tell you what I've been reading because it does apply to allowing. But I've been reading a book called The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. And like I said, it gave me some really great insights for the podcast today. But I have to tell you, I read this book a few years ago. This is a reread for me. And I didn't really like the book at the time. It was actually really frustrating for me because so much of what he talks about in the surrender experience is this process of allowing life to unfold without fighting against it. I'm like, how do you do that? I don't even know how to do this. So this time around, I'm reading the book, I'm understanding much more of what he is saying because I've been living this way for the last year and a half. And the premise of the book, what he's talking about in his life, is that he decided when he was fairly young, like in his early 20s, that he would say yes to anything that came his way. He would just surrender to what life was offering to him. And he was able to watch the way his life unfolded. And it is a fascinating story. because along the way, he started three businesses, three that I can remember, and they were very successful businesses. He had a lot of other things that he was doing, like volunteering in the prison and teaching meditation to the inmates there, a lot of neat things that he was doing in his life. But he started three very successful businesses, one of them being the Temple of the Universe. He lives outside of Gainesville, Florida. So if you're from there, this is who I'm talking about. The Temple of the Universe, which is a spiritual center. And then he started Built with Love, which is a construction company, even though he didn't have any background in construction. And then he was also the creator of a company called Personal Programming, which created medical billing software for doctors' offices back in the 80s. So this was way back before people had their own personal computers, and he taught himself how to program, and he created a multi-million-dollar business and kind of the top software in the country for physicians to use in their offices without having any former training or background in that area. So it really is a very interesting story of how this kind of just unfolds, because people were asking him to help out. And I'm not saying, you guys know I'm not a fan of saying yes to everything that comes your way, particularly in this day and age where I feel like because we are so well connected to one another, there are so many asks and so many possibilities that we do need to be very mindful in decisions that we're making. But when it comes to the mission life has in store for you, I do believe that there is power in allowing more help to show up, allowing detours that might lead to connections or solutions that we may have been unaware of before, allowing more flow to happen for creative ideas to come through, or outcomes that you weren't expecting that can surprise and delight you along the way, and less forcing things to be a certain way, our way, when life has a different way in store for you. So when we're trying to force things, we often miss things. And we definitely, I know for me, I was missing the fun of my business. I was missing the fun of my life because I was trying to just control all of the pieces. So you all have had this experience of having your agenda and then life happening. I'm going to start off with a very simple example of this. So, I've already given a couple with the way that I thought my week was going to flow, and then making some pivots and still getting things done, but not necessarily in the order that I thought. But I was driving to a massage appointment last week. My massage therapist, Karen, was 30 minutes away from my house, and I left 35 minutes early. And I thought I was going to be there early. That was my plan. And it turns out I've had a different plan, because getting out to her house involves a lot of country roads, and I got stuck behind a big dump truck or something that was going pretty slow for about half of the trip. And I ended up being 5 minutes late. So what I didn't know was that in reality, I was always going to be 5 minutes late. How do I know? Because that's what happened. So my plan was to be on time, maybe even 5 minutes early if I was lucky. But what has happened to me in the past was I would get really frustrated when my expectation or my plan of how I thought things were going to go differed from reality and what I felt like should have happened. But what I've realized is there is another option. And the other option is for us to learn how to surrender and allow life to happen as it was always going to happen, and to be okay with that. And so one of the ways that I do this is I like to give myself, think about possibilities of why I was stuck behind that dump truck. Maybe I was prevented from getting in an accident. Like maybe I was delayed enough getting to her house that I missed getting sideswiped by another big dump truck. Or maybe Karen needed 5 more minutes with another client or someone else on the phone. Or maybe I needed to practice patience and think about how little control I have over things, even when I plan and execute really well. So like I said, I'm not saying that we need to be passive observers of life and just kind of float along and just do whatever comes our way. We do have oars in our boat, and I think we are meant to use them. But we often end up feeling frustrated that these kinds of things get in the way of our plans. That's the way we think about it, right? When this was the way it was always going to happen, we just didn't realize it. This is what's real. When you're thinking about this moment and what is happening or what has happened, that is the reality. The idea that you had was never reality. It was just a good plan. But this is reality, what's happening right now. And we often mean when life unfolds this way, outside of our plan, we make it mean that we can't reach our goals. And what I want you to realize today is that we can reach our goals in spite of what's happening in our lives. We think sometimes, okay, things might be delayed. Like the goal that we're trying to reach is now going to be delayed because X, Y, and Z happened. And I want you to just think about that word delay for a second. It's subjective, right? Who decides if something is delayed? Is it you or is it the universe, right? Things might happen later than you anticipated, but it doesn't mean it's delayed. It doesn't mean that you're behind. What if the delay was actually on purpose? Or what if it was even for your benefit? Being delayed is just our own way of looking at something, right? Just like when we tell ourselves, I'm behind or I'm playing catch up. This is just the way that we're choosing to look at our lives. And these thoughts are totally optional. And it usually causes us to feel bad or feel overwhelmed or feel inadequate in some way. So one of the ways that I help myself to get out of that stuck space, feeling like, oh no, this is not going to work out. I just ask myself the question, okay, so now what are we going to do? This is what's happened, or this is what's happening. So now what are we going to do? Because you do have the option. You can continue to fight against reality, which is a fruitless pursuit, right? Which leaves us frustrated and stressed and overwhelmed often. None of that is necessary or helpful. But we can also stay really curious and unwavering in our goals. I wonder how this is going to go, or what am I supposed to learn from this experience? Or now what am I going to do? So I was coaching 2 clients this week, and this something along these lines was coming up in each of these calls. So my first client had made plans for the day, and she has a lot going on. She has, I mean, as we all do, but she's working on a fairly large project that involves her being out in the community and making connections and making sure that things are moving along. And it had snowed, and she has a really large driveway. It requires a plow to get the snow away from driving spaces, but people were showing up and they were getting stuck in her driveway, and she was not able to get to all the tasks on her list because she ended up, shoveling these people out and asking neighbors for help because she didn't have the right tools on hand at the moment, and there were a lot of things going on. So she was telling me, she's like, I wake up in the morning and I feel like I'm always racing the clock because these kinds of things continue to happen. I feel like there's too much to do and not enough time. And every day I'm not getting to everything that I need to do. And it's, of course, not for the lack of effort, right? This is not a very helpful way to look at this situation because it creates that racing feeling every single day, right? So if she wasn't thinking those thoughts, she could still move throughout her day and get the things done as much as she can. I understand that sometimes these things delay us for hours and we're not able to get to all the things, and that's okay, right? Getting the things done that she has time for is still a celebration and it's still a win, and she can still reach her goals in spite of what is going on. When we allow, oftentimes we're more productive. We're definitely more peaceful. We're more relaxed. We're able to enjoy the experience of our lives so much more. I had another experience with a client who was really frustrated because she's like, every time I turn around, my house is just a mess. And then I end up spending time cleaning up my house. She's like, why can't my house just stay clean? This always reminds me of, I don't know if you guys have seen The Incredibles, but the very first Incredibles movie, or one of my favorite movies. I love The Incredibles so much. I think they're so funny. But Mr. Incredible is getting interviewed. This is like in the first 5 minutes of the movie or something. And he's like, I just spend my time cleaning up the world and making sure that everybody's staying saved. I'm saying this right. He's like, I just get to the point sometimes where I'm like, why can't the world just stay saved? And so I always just kind of laugh about that when I'm thinking about my own house and how the people in my house live in my house and leave their shoes and all the things, because people live there, right? So this client has a 2 and a 6-year-old boys, both boys, and a husband who just doesn't care where he takes off his shoes. And she's like, but I've told him and they should know by now. But in reality is that they don't. That is the reality of the situation, or they don't notice like she notices, right? It's not good or bad. It's just the way that things are. And I know I have 2 teenagers. I have a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old, and they do similar things. They're not 2 and 6, they're 14 and 16. And they do similar things. They're like little squirrels. They just leave trail of crumbs and wrappers in their wake as they move through life. And I have just decided to think like, this is just my life with kids. I don't give up on them. We just clean it up, or I ask them to clean up after themselves, and we just move on with our day. I don't make that big of a deal about it because I understand they're still learning how to do this. They're still learning how to take care of themselves. I have been known to say to my kids, we don't live in a barn. But I get that most of the time I just am like, hey, this is just the way it is. It usually takes less than 5 minutes to clean something up. I involve them usually. Sometimes I just do it by myself. But if you spend the majority of your time agonizing over the fact that your life should be different, or that people you live with should be different, that they should know things by now, we end up spending a lot of our time and our energy feeling really frustrated or angry or overwhelmed. And that lasts much longer than 5 minutes. And I'm not saying you give up. Like I said, you can continue to try and find solutions or systems to make your life easier. You guys know I'm all about systems, right? But you can do it from a place of curiosity instead of a place of frustration with your crew. Understanding that there is a learning curve, even when they're 16, apparently, because that's the situation that I'm still in. And maybe your 16-year-old is amazing, but my 16-year-old, he's still amazing, but he's not amazing all the time at putting his wrappers in the trash, which is fine. Just takes people a while to catch on to your great ideas, and that's okay. So what I've just kind of decided is this is life. This is the way things are going to be. So there is a difference. I do want to say here really quickly, kind of to just go down a little rabbit hole for a second. There is a difference between procrastinating or feeling resolved, like, well, this is just the way that it is, versus showing up and getting derailed by something that you weren't expecting to happen. We have to learn how to roll with things. Sometimes this is allowing. My mom used to tell me all the time when I was a kid, you just got to go with the flow. Because this was something that was really hard for me. Like I said, kind of controlling. and that's okay. This is just the lesson that I needed to learn multiple times. But there is this element of mystery to life, right? We don't know how the day is really going to go until we're in it. And we're seeing these experiences as kind of the surprise of the day. It's like, oh, I didn't realize this was going to happen, but here we are. Most of the time, we can find a way to add the energy of playfulness to the day or to your life. It kind of keeps us on our toes, and we can make a game out of things. I understand that there are some situations where, life throws us curveballs that are not fun. We don't want them to be fun. We don't think that they're fun. I remember the day my son broke his collarbone. It was not a fun day. I've had many days like that, just like I'm sure you have. I'm not trying to make light of these particular situations, but I am trying to make light of candy wrappers and crumbs that seem to get in our way, or, shoveling people out of the snow, or whatever is happening. So this is what allowing feels like. It's going to happen, and it's going to be maybe even better than what I had planned. I love to think about things like that. It's like, okay, this is what's going on, and how could this be for my benefit? How could this be happening for me? What we often try to do is to force an outcome. This is what I feel called to create or compelled to create in my life. And we set down the path and expecting it to be more of a linear journey and more of like a straight, peaceful path to the goal. And I know intellectually we don't think that, but when we end up coming up against obstacles that we weren't expecting, it's tough. We get our knickers in a twist because that wasn't what we expected, but life doesn't ever flow like that. I just want to give you an analogy here of trying to force something and how it ends up being to our detriment sometimes. So this was actually happened, I don't want to say the other day. It was like a couple of years ago, actually now at the time. I was at the gym and I was cooling down from a workout. So I remember I was working out with my daughter, Lucy, and I was doing some stretching afterwards, stretching lower body, and my ego got involved. I forced a stretch. I was sitting on my butt on the floor. My legs were extended out in front of me. I was just doing a simple forward fold. So I was just bringing my head down to my legs. And my ego got involved. So I was trying to force a stretch. I was trying to get into that stretch deeper than maybe I ever had before. I don't know, but I injured my back in the process. And I think it was because I was holding onto my feet or my legs and I gave a little bit of a tug and my lower back was like, whoa, that was too much. And so for the next 6 months, I could barely, just sitting on the floor, also legs extended, I could barely bring my chest forward. I lost probably like 90% of my flexibility in that position for a long time, for months. And to this day, I'm a lot more cautious about, of course, that position, but any stretch that I'm doing, I just realize it's much better for my body. It's much easier for me to just allow gravity to do the work in the stretch instead of trying to force something. So when we try to force something, we sometimes create this start and stop energy where we where we try to force something, it doesn't work out very well, and then we spiral and we're just like, oh my gosh, that didn't work out very well, not to the point of like all is lost, but it just throws us off and it takes us a while to get back instead of just allowing life to unfold the way it was always going to unfold. We just didn't realize it. So, like I mentioned, the truth of the matter is you can get things done in spite of what's going on. Sometimes life is calling us to learn a lesson that we are not realizing is the gift. So life is asking us to trust more. It's asking us to eliminate things in our lives. It's asking us to change directions or even change our attitude about something. We have to stay open so that you're learning the lessons life is trying to teach you along the way. You are called to create, but for many, many reasons beyond what you might think. We want to be able to stay open to this. This is allowing, it's this relaxed energy, and it is the sweet spot between focused work and flow. And it kind of does ebb and flow. And it is kind of a balanced energy there, where there's some days where things just really flow, and some days we just need to take our foot off the gas. So we want to be looking for ways to be surprised and delighted by what life has in store for each of us, the help and the blessings that we're going to receive along the way, oftentimes with even less work on our part. When we feel called to create something, we have to continue to trust that God has a plan to help us to execute it, or the universe, however you want to look at it. We are not just here floating around in chaos trying to get it all done ourselves. So if you're listening and you're allowing, you'll start to notice how your life fits into this well-orchestrated plan. I know that you have seen miracles. You're just like, I couldn't have planned that better if I had tried. That's what I want you to look for. We don't have to stress or get our panties in a wad because we're trying to control things that we ultimately don't have any control over. So how do we do this? Like I mentioned, we have to intentionally be looking for it and focusing on it, but we do need to breathe. This always helps me to allow things to flow. You want to allow yourself to float with the current when you realize you have very little control over a situation that you find yourself in. You want to take care of what needs to be taken care of. I used to listen to the Susie Orman show back when we lived in Mississippi. This was a long time ago. This was back when I was pregnant with Isaac. So 17 years ago or something, I loved listening to the Susie Orman show. I don't even know if it's still on, but the thing that she always said at the end of every show was people first, then money, and then things. And I think sometimes we have this idea that the reason why we're creating something is for an outcome that may or may not be related to people. But I mean, the outcome is always related to people. I know you're here to make the world a better place so that people can thrive in situations that they're found in. But there are people placed in our path along the way that we aren't expecting to connect with for a myriad of different reasons. And it is probably oftentimes it's not in direct correlation with the goal. So you want to be thinking about that. People first, then money, and then things, and allow good things to come your way. Continue to watch for the lessons that you need to learn and the experiences life is handing you. Trust that it will work out because it always does. I promise you it does. When you're in this frame of mind, you are an instrument to benefit the people who are around you. Not, like I said, always in the way that you think. Sometimes it's the emergency room nurse. I get it. But that's just the way that life is. So stay open to that. Allow those experiences and allow those gifts and ease to flow to you more and more and more in your life. It takes practice and it takes intention. All right, that's what I have for you today. If you know somebody who could benefit from hearing this podcast today, please share the episode with them. And if you haven't yet done so, please leave me a rating and review on the show. It helps me out tremendously. All right, you guys, I hope that you have a wonderful week. If you are interested in connecting with me to get your 15 minutes assessment, Unwavering Woman Assessment with me, just go ahead and go to janeenalley.com/CEO and book some time with me. I would love to connect with you on that call. So go ahead and go to janeenalley.com/CEO and I will connect with you there. Otherwise, have a beautiful rest of your week, my friends, and we will all talk to you soon. See ya.